To be able to place the centre of gravity of the Albatross, we must first have a method for obtaining said centre of gravity. This can be done by measuring the reactions at each landing gear and completing a summation of moments over different CGs. When compared to the actual CG location, this works reasonably well, with the r² value of 0.99. The slight offset of the line not passing between the origin is possibly due to the complex geometry of the Albatross, leading to making an accurate model difficult within Unity. To test thrust output versus RPM, the Albatross can be placed in front of some force measurement device, and then the RPM can be increased in even increments, and the results can be plotted in the following graph. The thrust output is relatively linear compared to the change in RPM, except at lower RPM there is simply not enough RPM to produce a thrust, but once thrust is produced it increases relatively linearly with RPM, leading to favourable handling characteristics. This clip demonstrates the aircraft's response to inputs, confirming that all inputs correspond with relevant flight dynamics conventions. Looking at the graphs in the following clips, we can see that the change in angle of attack is consistent with the change in elevator input and consistent with the change in the lift over the tail. We now evaluate the change in pitch response with differing wind speeds and CG locations. Decreasing the speed to that of stall speed, the pitch response has a larger damping period. When the COM is closer to the leading edge, the amplitude of pitch response also decreases, with the damping period only becoming slightly smaller. Increasing the speed to Vmax, the damping period becomes significantly smaller, and there is a decrease in pitch response amplitude, but similar behaviour is found when observing the centre of mass position. At cruise velocity, a short period of 1.15 seconds was found, and a damping ratio of 0.397 was found for the default CG location of Z equals 0.058 meters. Comparing the roll rate between the following clips, we can see that as aileron deflection increases, so does roll rate, as expected. As well as this, with increasing wind speeds, the roll rate also increases. It is worth mentioning at this point that the Albatross simulation has a tendency for the port side to roll over to the starboard, so this may have an influence. We can also verify that the rudder deflection gives the correct sign in change of side slip angle. Comparing the damping of pitch and yaw, it is clear that yaw has minimal damping in comparison due to its more drastic and faster changes in side slip angle compared to changes in angle of attack. The following clips are for verifying if the default position for the centre of mass is on the thrust line by moving the COM above or below its default position and applying thrust. This would make the Albatross either pitch up or down if the COM is not on the thrust line. Whereas for the default position, there is no change in angle of attack, therefore the default position of y equals negative 0.03 meters is correct. This graph shows CL against angle of attack, showing a CL max of 1.3 with a 30-degree flap deflection at 10 degrees angle of attack. This plot shows CD versus CL for a clean configuration. This plot shows the lift-to-drag ratio versus CL, showing that the maximum lift-to-drag ratio is approximately 13.5. The manufacturer specifies the maximum of 30, so this simulation shows roughly half of that. This graph shows CM, about the centre of mass, versus CL. This shows that the best elevator angle for trim would be approximately 4.5 degrees, as the 5-degree line nearly passes through the origin. This means that when there is no lift, there is no change in pitch, leading to good handling characteristics. This plot shows the CM versus CL for a range of COM locations. If the COM was located at the leading edge, this would be the most stable configuration, due to it having the most negative gradient. The smallest gradient of the COM lines is at location 0.6 of the MAC. It is not quite a flat gradient, therefore the neutral point is slightly more forward than this at approximately 40 to 45% of the MAC. This video shows the ground control response. At low speeds there is not enough speed to have reasonable handling capabilities. Between 15 meters per second and roughly takeoff speed, there is enough speed and handling to turn the aircraft, but any closer to takeoff speed and the aircraft can begin to roll if the turning circle is too tight. Higher speeds will also result in excessive lateral forces on the nose gear and all gears, possibly causing failure. The following clip shows the unstick speed with pullback to be approximately 15 meters per second. Adding flaps reduces this speed to approximately 13 meters per second for takeoff. This clip shows the trimming of the aircraft in flight. The trim settings were found to be approximately minus 2.3 degrees deflection for the elevators at an RPM of 5160. A more experienced pilot than myself may be able to trim the aircraft better, but these settings work well enough for maintaining steady level flight with very little input. The minimum and maximum trim flight speeds were found to be 14 and 47 meters per second for the Albatross, showing that it can reach a reasonably high maximum speed, and it can also fly trimmed at lower speeds than takeoff. To calculate the long period phugoid frequency, we first pitch the aircraft into a downward motion and release off the elevators and all other flight settings. And then we take the inverse of the time from the first deflection to when the aircraft becomes stable again. This period was found to be approximately 36-37 seconds, which resulted in a frequency of 0.028 Hz. This clip shows a trimmed flight circuit of the Albatross aircraft, proving that the trim settings do in fact work and that the aircraft can be handled relatively easily around a given circuit.